Welcome and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Bevan Parker-Churkes. I'm the National Program Director for the Childcare and Early Learning Team at Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC. Thanks for joining us today for the release of our Building Innovation for Childcare Policy Recommendations Report. This publication was made possible by our funders, Pivotal and Salesforce. The report, Community Integrated Childcare Co-Location Foundations for Success, was authored by Beth Melton of Melton Strategic Solutions, with support from Nicole Barcliffe, our Senior Policy Director here at LISC, and in collaboration with our great team, Megan Ressler and Regina and myself at the National Childcare and Early Learning. I'm pleased to be joined by Beth and Nicole for today's presentation. Next slide, please. So LISC has developed and managed the Building Innovation for Childcare program since 2020 in an effort to support innovation and the intentional incorporation and co-location of childcare alongside other community amenities. Next slide. To date, we've supported 19 projects across 15 markets with pre-development funding, technical assistance, and opportunities for peer learning across a community of practice so we may learn from one another. As you can see, we work with a variety of project types across diverse locations, some embedding childcare within affordable housing, but also unique cases of connections within workforce training, senior housing, medical campuses, and other community hubs. This report would not have been possible without our Building Innovation. Oh, Megan, sorry, we've flipped. You got to go back to the presentation mode. This report would not have been possible without our Building Innovation grantees. Thank you for committing your commitment to building a resilient childcare system, and to those grantees who were interviewed for this report. Over the last 5 years, the LISC team has been collecting detailed project learnings to develop informative public reports. Our recent report, Community Integrated Childcare Co-Location Foundations for Success, contains policy recommendations that Nicole will take us through a little later this afternoon. And this was all generated through program data that we collected. Additional detail and background is available in the report, which we'll drop into the link in a moment. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Beth Melton, the lead author of our report.
Thanks, Bevan. Really happy to be here. Megan, you can go ahead and move to the next slide here. So within this report, we have defined childcare co-location as the development of childcare facilities with commercial, residential, and community spaces. And so often co-location is referring just to the development of physical space that's in close proximity to another use. And within this report and in this conversation, we really are advocating for an enhanced definition of community integrated childcare co-location that really goes beyond mere proximity and is about supporting the holistic development of communities, embracing the promising opportunity for intertwining childcare supply building with community and economic development. Next slide, please. Community integrated co-location offers us a potential solution to the challenges associated with creating new childcare supply by embedding childcare within broader community and economic development. The model not only leverages economies of scale and resource sharing to increase access to childcare, but also aligns with good planning practices by engaging with the community to locate critical and responsive services where they're most accessible to residents, homes, or workplaces. The success of this type of childcare co-location requires some supportive policies, which Nicole will talk to us about in a few minutes here. Next slide, please, Megan. So, as Bevan said, for this report, we interviewed the grantees of this project to really learn from their successes and challenges with co-location. And through that, we've identified 4 key building blocks for successful community integrated co-location, which you see on the screen here. So the first is community connections. Successful co-location really builds on community connections. So we see that community partners are working with childcare providers who know and are trusted in the community. The services being developed are aligned with the needs of the community, and the co-location really enhances opportunities for parents to have choice and easy access to care. Our second building block is around strong partnerships. So, through these conversations with grantees, we really saw that strong partnerships are key to the success of these co location projects. This means that community partners and developers are working closely with childcare providers and leveraging their complementary expertise to work toward a shared vision of providing childcare for the community. The third building block is around simplified processes. So we heard that there's a real need to develop simplified processes for childcare co-location. Community partners and childcare providers alike experience a lot of barriers when they try to navigate the various layers of regulation and approvals, including not just licensing, but also planning and zoning, building codes, fire codes, health codes, etc. And when all of these things layer on top of each other, the development of a childcare facility can become a long and expensive process. And the added complexity of co-location can help to exacerbate these issues. And our fourth building block is around access to capital. So as we all know, within childcare in general, access to capital is a challenge. We did hear from the grantees that they found that there were some unique opportunities for creative funding that can really come with co-location projects. Um, when their co-located use creates access to specific funding sources, such as those for supportive family services, workforce development, or housing. Co-location can also help to create efficiencies that support the sustainability of the childcare operation. However, childcare co-location projects still struggle to build out a full capital stack for development, and so access to capital remains a key need within the policy changes needed for successful co-location. So that's the quick and dirty version of what we found in the report, what is detailed. And I know we'll drop the link in the chat here. Really encourage everyone to take a look and read in more depth about what we heard. I'm going to hand it off now to Nicole Barcliffe, who's the Senior Policy Director at LISC, to share a bit about the policies that we've identified as critical to supporting the successes of co-located childcare.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for everyone who's joined and is participating in this flash webinar. One of the things that I'd like to do for really brief context setting is do a disclaimer to say that the recommendations identified in this report are by no means exhaustive. You may think of other ways that your sector in particular could be leaning in, and that is great and okay. And actually reach out to us afterwards if you feel like we missed something. But the recommendations that we came up with really came from listening to the practitioners involved in the overall project, and also kind of trying to make some connections and connecting the dots between where we see policies having gaps in serving the childcare sector. So we can go to the next slide. So the first recommendation of a supportive policy is to include childcare in community and economic development planning. That may sound super simple and oh my goodness, aren't we doing that already? But actually you'd be very surprised at the gaps that exist at state and local levels with respect to thinking and visioning where childcare fits into systems. So economic development corporations and community development corporations are entities that exist at local or regional levels across the country. They focus on wealth creation and things like improved quality of life outcomes. While childcare is critically important to both economic and community development, not all EDCs and CDCs are engaged in this area. And at a really small micro level, co-location in partnership with economic development corporations and community development corporations is a really promising practice for supporting co-location and building the supply of childcare more generally. EDCs and CDCs can also support childcare by incorporating it as a core piece of community and economic infrastructure. So again, thinking in terms of inclusion and not necessarily setting up a separate system to support childcare. One of the things that you'll see to the right of the slides are the sectors that we have identified as being, best primed to lead in some of these policy recommended activities. Again, not an exhaustive list. You may see yourself fitting in there and you're not identified, but on face, after being around the table with practitioners, those are the entities that we came up with. And as you can see, it spans public and private sectors. Next slide. The next recommendation that we have is the really necessary step of conducting a child care facilities needs assessment. One of the most significant challenges of supporting child care facility development is that there's really increasingly a lack of publicly available and accessible data on child care facility condition, quality, and availability. And as a result, most entities, whether you're in the public or private sector, you're not able to adequately assess how the condition and service capacity of facilities may affect health, safety, program quality, or where there's opportunities to increase access to care. So national, state, and local child care facilities needs assessments can provide critical data that really help identify areas of greatest need and opportunity for child care facility development, and also geographically where there may be gaps in service. These kinds of tools would help public and private funders, child care providers, development partners, and other stakeholders identify and target resources for child care facilities projects. Next slide. The next recommendation that we came up with was to simplify and align the regulatory environment for the development of co-located and other child care facilities. Now, this is a very interesting time for talking about regulations, so I want to be very clear about what it is that we mean when we talk about simplifying and aligning regulations. So the regulatory environment for childcare is in need of updating and modernization. And so what we mean is that mostly at the state and local levels, a thorough review of regulations that co-located and other childcare projects has to navigate. It should happen in order to simplify and align regulations without compromising the health and safety of children. And so, what do we mean by that specifically? That means reviewing cited violations to identify places where there's complex layers of state or local regulations that are creating barriers that could be removed. That could be convening with child care providers and co-location partners to conduct site visits and collect feedback on the barriers they've experienced. Reviewing and modernizing regulations with a lens of childcare as critical infrastructure, or even repositioning regulatory agents to serve in supportive or coaching roles with an identified role of and goal of helping childcare providers and programs meet the requirements. So not a punitive lens. Again, we've identified this as being primarily a public sector activity, but of course others might have thoughts or some ideas of how to weigh in to facilitate that activity. Next slide. Next is that there's definitely need to support providers who want to expand and grow their businesses with the tools and resources that they need to partner on co-location projects. So childcare providers who have business goals that include expansion and growth, um, it becomes really tricky to navigate environments where your expertise as a childcare service provider or business owner or early learning expert doesn't necessarily align with real estate practices and or local zoning requirements or regulatory requirements. So as detailed in some of the recommendations that you'll see in the report, community connected providers are a really ideal choice for a co-location project, and providers who are interested should be identified and supported. So support could include things like building the expertise of providers and skills like navigating licensing, understanding the components of high-performing childcare facilities, financial modeling and business planning, all of these resources and trainings that kind of link community development partners with providers are important for creating these strong types of partnerships where the burden of these efforts is shared. And we've identified this as both a public and private sector activity, so everyone can be engaged in this. Next slide. The next is to connect potential projects with partners and resources. This is really an all hands on deck type situation. So again, to get out of this mode of thinking about childcare in isolation and to encourage entities to view childcare as part of a broader community and economic development landscape. So community development partners may conceptualize a childcare project that's co-located before even connecting with a provider. And so to facilitate the successful implementation of projects, several types of resources would be helpful, right? So making the connection between interested providers and potential projects. Establishing some sort of aggregated information about accessing funding streams and how to braid and blend them or weave them together or stack them. Getting information about technical and legal components of co-location projects. Training and information on childcare business operations. That's something that is often identified in the community and economic development space as a gap, right? They know real estate, they know community development, they know job creation, they know planning, but they may not know the specifics of a childcare business operation. So knowledge about the aspects of childcare in a high performing space centered in a community development context is really essential for the success of these kinds of projects. Next slide. The next, and if anyone has ever met with or worked with me or my team or anyone who's an financial intermediary in the childcare space, you will know that there is not nearly enough capital to expand access for high performing excellent childcare and high performing spaces. And so there is absolutely a need to expand access to capital for co-located childcare facilities. So currently, and this is, I do federal affairs, so there's currently no federal resources that are dedicated that support acquisition, construction, or renovation of childcare facilities. Increasingly, we're seeing states make moves to try to allocate resources, but it's a very sparse environment with really unpredictable and uncertain types of capital access. So if we think about childcare providers as small business operators who are facing really unique financial challenges and barriers to entry, and who've had significant obstacles in accessing traditional childcare, not non-childcare specific financial services, you will absolutely see the need for access to dedicated capital, but also technical assistance and capacity building resources specifically related to facilities and infrastructure goal. So you kind of get a twofer if you expand access to capital for co-located facilities. You get an improvement in space and an accessible space, but you also get really a building of capacity of the childcare business model at the same time. Entities who fund childcare facilities need to pair their financial resources with technical assistance in order to create this kind of access and to help ensure that childcare businesses are sustainable and thrive. So next poll. So what do we do now and where do we align? We've just reviewed about 6 policy recommendations that can support childcare co-location, and they span multiple sectors and many levels of implementation. We'd like to pause and invite you to reflect on where you actually fit in to this entire conversation. Which of the actions can you directly support or influence in your role, whether that's in planning, funding, policy, or in partnerships? We're going to use a really quick poll to see where the room is aligned. And there might be where there might be actual opportunities to deepen engagements. I'll note that in order to take the poll, when the poll box pops up, make sure that you scroll down in order to see the choices that are available, and then click the boxes to the left of the choices, and that is how you vote. I'll give you a few minutes to do that.
And while that's happening, I just wanted to flag Louise Stoney, who's in the audience, mentioned that Indiana recently created a new set of standards for their microcenter pilot, which was the goal was exactly what Nicole was suggesting in terms of reducing sort of issues around regulatory frameworks, but keeping in mind health and safety for children. So we'll see if we can circulate some information on that post-call.
Great. And then Megan, you're just going to have to tap me when we're ready to talk about, or actually maybe I'll let you talk about the results of the poll.
Sure. Well, we have about almost half of you have responded. Thank you so much. So we'll just give you another few moments to lock in your responses, and then I will end the poll and see where we have landed. Good
Again,
news
just
is
want to
we have,
flag. Oh, go
oh,
ahead,
sorry,
Megan.
I was just going to say good news is we have folks in each and every one of these categories. So
Excellent.
all right, about 10 more seconds if you haven't participated and would like to. And then I will share our responses here.
Great. So as we can see, this is really great. We see the results of the poll, and it looks like everyone on the call is finding a way, or I can envision a way that they can help positively influence the policy environment in support of co-located childcare projects, which is really, really great. Devin, any other observation that you have based upon these outcomes?
No, I'm excited to see that there's tools and resources, technical assistance available to support a lot of these co-location projects. We know there's expertise on both sides of the house, developers, childcare operators, housing partners. And so when we can combine this expertise, I think it goes a long way. And I think that's why we're getting so much innovation and traction in this space as well.
Excellent. So we can go to the next slide. So here's your call to action. We often have these conversations and review the reports, and people say, well, what is it that I could be doing? Hopefully, by taking that poll that you guys just took, you kind of actually see an area that you fit into for really moving forward and trying to integrate this perspective and these approaches into the work that you're doing. But there are some core things that we just want to highlight that you should be doing. One, elevate childcare in your planning and funding decisions. For too long, childcare businesses, childcare programs have been viewed in isolation when they're actually integrated and really integral parts of community and economic development, and integral parts of just like local and state communities. So again, as you're going about your work, for those of you on the community and economic development side of the house, can you think about, does childcare fit into this? Can childcare benefit from whatever activity or planning or new funding short or development you're doing? The second is advocate for right-sized regulatory and funding changes that unlock and unleash positive opportunities to co-locate childcare in an innovative fashion. And so it cannot be overstated how important a diverse set of voices are in support of these kinds of approaches. So particularly for those who are sitting either in the philanthropic or financing or public sector purchase, it is really important for those voices to kind of amplify what I really believe childcare providers, childcare businesses, childcare educators have been calling for quite some time. So again, there is an opportunity to advocate and add voice to right-size approaches for regulatory and funding changes that unlock co-location.
And on that thread as well, I think inviting those partnerships and collaboration across agencies and organizations, we see deep expertise in development partners, childcare operators, affordable housing developers, workforce training, right? And when we combine sort of these cross-sector partnerships, we're really given a whole set of tools to help support the planning, design, capital raising, and implementation strategies around these co-location projects. I mean, they're making huge impacts on community. And when we have mission-aligned partners, it can really work to accelerate all of our work. That said, we encourage you to connect with LISC and folks like LISC and other CDFI partners that are working in the co-location space. We're trying to do a lot of convening around this work, sharing resources and best practices. There's a lot we can be learning from one another in this space, and really try to create a shared language and policy framework for moving these items forward. And with that, I'll just put it to the next slide, which has Nicole and my contact information. We're happy to and encourage you to reach out and talk to us about any ideas, anything we've missed. We want to keep this conversation going. We're happy to continue to support our Building Innovation program into the future, and really look forward to hearing from you. Post call, we will be recirculating, I believe, the video and the link to the policy report. So with that, I want to thank Nicole and Beth for joining us today as speakers, and Regina and Megan for helping on the back end support. Thank you all for being here and joining us for a quick flash webinar on policy recommendations related to co-location. Have a nice day. Take care.